coming with us to the cemetery. The cemetery is the new Montefiore Cemetery, located on Wellwood Avenue, all the way down by the Southern State Parkway. If you'll be coming with us to the burial, the middle service at New Montefiore Cemetery, upon completion of the service and a quick stop in the facility, please come out front with your headlights and your flashing lights on. And our fellow funeral staff, the men in black, will help direct all the cars to line up. The hearse will be a gray hearse. I have the opportunity to work at the Riverside Mass North Chapel right now. And so it'll say Riverside Mass North in the window, and it'll be the gray hearse, and that's the hearse that will be following in procession to the cemetery. So I'll be with everybody here all the way through to the cemetery and completion of the burial. If you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you for being here today, showing your love and support to the family. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly rise.
You could be seated. I'd like to call upon Rabbi David Bachman, the rabbi, interim rabbi here at Temple Beth Shalom, to offer us a psalm.
כל אומר אקרא ואומר מה אקרא, כל הבשר חציר וכל חסדו כציץ השדה. יבש חציר נבל ציץ כי רוח אדוני נשבה בו, אך אין חציר העם, יבש חציר נבל ציץ, ודבר אלוהינו יקום לעולם. From the book of Isaiah, a voice says, "Cry out," and I say, "What shall I cry?" All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, when a wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are as grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever.
And traditionally, we read Psalm 23, perhaps the most well-known and beloved of the Psalms. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar. Benotesha yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yanahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit mavet lo irara ki atay madi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Dishanta v'Hashem en roshi kosi revaya. Ach tova chesed yedefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. Our God and God of our fathers, our rock and our Redeemer, 1,000 years in your sight are as a passing day, an hour of night. Our generations come and go while you endure forever. We are always in your hand, O Lord, in death as in life, trusting in your love and in your judgments. O merciful Father, strengthen those who mourn the loss of Esther Meth. To Nina and Michael, to Toby, Ronnie and Jeff, Harris and Jennifer, to her grandchildren, Jamie, Randy and Michael, Mark, Aaron and Ethan, Madeline and Alana, to her great-grandchildren, Benny and Max, and of course we remember today Marvin, her husband, Zichrono Livracha, with much love. Help them to look beyond this moment. Help them to realize that death cannot destroy the bonds of your everlasting love. Sustain them with the knowledge of our faith, that you will not abandon our souls to the grave, that you will not allow your faithful to suffer oblivion. For you, O Lord, have taught us the way of life. Through you, our refuge, we gain eternity. And let us say, Amen. When I was trying to think of where to begin to speak of Esther Meth this morning, I kept coming back to the words of my colleague and friend, Rabbi Kara Weinstein Rosenthal, longtime associate rabbi of this congregation, Temple Beth Shalom, and current rabbi of my synagogue, Melville Jewish Center. When I told Rabbi Rosenthal that Esther Meth had passed away, her first reaction was so simple and so heartfelt. She said, "Oh no, I love Esther Meth. What a sweet lady." And I think that's exactly how we all feel today as we gather to remember Esther Meth with love. We are so very saddened by Esther's death, even as we are comforted that she lived a relatively long and good life. And we are comforted as well by our many, many warm memories of Esther for the very, very special person that she was. When I first told Nina that I wanted to meet with the family to talk about her mother, I asked her to tell the siblings that I would like everyone to set aside 2 hours for the appointment, since I knew that sometimes it does take that long. I'm not sure if it was Nina or Toby or Ronnie or Harris who said at the beginning of the appointment, 2 hours is not enough. And indeed, we did go over the 2 hours that we had set aside, and that alone says so much about Esther. I am happy to say that I myself did know Esther Meth, may her memory be a blessing, which is not always the case when a rabbi is asked to deliver a eulogy at a funeral. While I knew Esther and her husband, Marvin, may his memory be a blessing, when I was here as the assistant rabbi to Rabbi Joseph P. Sternstein, Zichrono Livracha, here at Beth Shalom from 1988 to 1993. I really knew her mostly as a very, very good friend of my mother, Estelle Jackness, and my father, Nathan Jackness, for many, many years. In fact, as I was telling the family, Esther and Marvin were actually guests at my wedding to my wife, Suri, who's here today also, in 1983, June of 83, up in Poughkeepsie. And I want you to know that my parents really didn't invite a lot of people to the wedding, and that alone says so much about how both my parents loved and respected Esther and Marvin. And over the years, it has been always a great pleasure to see Esther whenever we got a chance to do so. I totally agree with Rabbi Rosenthal. What a sweet woman. You can't say it any simpler than that. Esther was indeed a sweet woman, a very sweet woman. She had such a nice personality. She was simple, down to earth, unpretentious. She was just a nice lady. Esther was friendly and outgoing, kind and caring. And thinking of her always gives me a very warm feeling. I can picture Esther in my mind's eye with her beautiful smile and can almost hear her voice in my head. Esther had a great sense of humor. In fact, she was voted the wittiest girl in her high school class. And that says a lot, since she went to the same high school as a guy named Melvin Kaminsky, better known these days as Mel Brooks. Though he graduated a few years ahead of her. I did check, I Googled it. So he was a few years, he's a little older. But Esther shared the same Borscht Belt sense of humor as he did. In fact, I'm told that Mel Brooks' stoop was near Esther's family's stoop in Brooklyn. So undoubtedly, they knew each other. And Esther always had that great sense of humor. Like in the summertime a few years ago when the family was having lunch in the backyard, and she said, "Well, excuse me, I have to go put on my bikini now." She was just a character, a real character. Another thing that made Esther so special was her simple wisdom. Esther was a wise person. She was a woman with seichel, with good common sense, and always had a very good advice to share with others. My wife, Suri, told me that years ago, when she and Esther were discussing relationships between parents and their children and their children's spouses, Esther gave her good advice on how to be a good mother-in-law. She said, "Just shut your mouth and kill him with kindness." She told Suri that you have to mind your own business in your relationships with your children and their spouses. Certainly a very good idea. Good advice. She had other good advice as well, like be happy, which was her motto. In fact, she had a sign on her refrigerator that said, "Just be happy." As she always said, laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. She once told one of the ladies in the sisterhood who was having conflicts in her marriage, well, you make him the king and you will be the malka, the queen, and you will have a great marriage. And the woman later took that advice and later came back to Esther and said that it did help her marriage a great deal. Esther would often say, you know, you get more flies with honey than with vinegar, or don't talk politics. Certainly also good advice, especially these days. These are just a few tidbits of Esther's great advice for living. She never went to college, but she was most certainly whip smart, as they put it to me. Esther was born in Brooklyn on November 29th, 1934. She was the youngest of 4 children, Harold, Murray, Rita, and Esther, born to Rose and Max Gabor, Zichronam Livracha, may all their memories now be for a blessing. Sadly, Esther's sister Rita died of polio at the age of only 12 or 13, before Esther was born. Esther's parents were so bereft upon Rita's death that they decided to have another child, a replacement child of sorts for her. Indeed, Esther was born close to Thanksgiving, right around the time of Rita's birthday. And it seemed, they tell me, that her parents willed it that way. They say that there was dancing in the streets when Esther was born. She was a blessing from the very beginning. And I'm sure that all Esther's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren feel that way. Esther grew up in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, 142 South 9th Street. She graduated from the Eastern District High School in 1952. After high school, Esther became a bookkeeper working for Mr. Glantz in the garment district. Her brother Murray worked in the area, and he would take her there by subway in the morning and accompany her back to Brooklyn at night. Esther's older brothers always looked out for her. Esther worked for 5 years or so until she gave birth to Nina, when she became a full-time wife and mother. Years later, at the age of 65, when all her kids were grown, Esther wanted to go back to work. So she answered an ad in the Penny Saver for a job. The person interviewing her asked her, so when did you last work? And Esther answered, 40 years ago. And she added, well, you know, I worked until I got pregnant and then went on maternity leave, but I'm a slow healer. The employer offered her the job, nevertheless. And when she told Marvin that if she went back to work, it would mean that he would have to help out more in the house, Marvin said, my limit is stopping off at Dairy Barn. And so in the end, she didn't take the job, even though that had been offered to her. Esther had a great love of family. She was, without a doubt, a wonderful wife and mother and grandmother and great-grandmother and sister. Esther met her husband Marvin on the boardwalk at Rockaway Beach. The family emphasized to me that it was on the boardwalk, not under the boardwalk. They met through Esther's dear cousin Claire and Claire's fiance Joe and Mo, sorry, typo. Mo, and his brother, who were friends of Marvin's. They were married on November 20th, 1955, in a very small wedding in Marvin's parents' apartment in Brooklyn, since Marvin's father was very ill at the time. But as Esther always said, we didn't have a good wedding, but the marriage was great. And we would all have to admit that that's much more important in the long term. Indeed, Esther and Marvin were wonderful, loving partners in life. We had a marriage, exclamation point, as Esther would put it, an emphasis on the exclamation points of that statement. They were married for 53 years at the time of Marvin passed away in April 2008. and it was a wonderful marriage. A marriage that was a role model for their children, grandchildren, and everyone who knew them. And not only was it a good marriage, but a successful marriage, given the birth of their 4 wonderful children, Nina, Toby, Ronnie, and Harris, and their wonderful spouses, Nina's husband, Michael, Ronnie's husband, Jeff, Harris's wife, Jennifer. Esther believed in tough love, but she was a very loving mother as well, a mother who was always there for her kids, perhaps sometimes a little late in picking them up, but still there for them. Nevertheless, Esther most certainly lived life, they tell me, on her own clock, usually stuck behind a slow-moving truck. Yet she raised 4 beautiful children and was so very proud of each one of them. Esther's home was the food home, the food house, the Hamisha house, a very warm and welcoming house. Everyone was always welcome to come and eat, and everyone seemed to know where all the snacks were stored. Not only that, but everything always tasted better at her house because of the love of the house, even the orange juice, I'm told. All the kids' friends felt that way. Grandma, as her grandchildren called her, certainly loved her grandchildren so very much. Jamie and Randy, Mark, Aaron and Ethan, Madeline and Alana. Yet she was so proud of each one of you. They all loved her so much as well and were involved in her life. Esther was blessed to become a Gigi, a great grandmother. She was privileged to live to see the birth of 2 great grandchildren, Randy and Michael's 2 sons, Benny and Max, with 2 X's, by the way. Esther's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren were certainly a tremendous legacy that she leaves behind. Esther was also blessed to have a very close relationships with her 2 brothers, with Harold and Murray. May their memories be a blessing. And at Esther's 60th birthday celebration, Murray called her his Schwester Esther. She was also very close to Harold's wife, Rosalind. In fact, they were more like sisters than sisters-in-law. Sadly, Harold, Rosalind, and their children were killed in a devastating car accident on a Labor Day weekend many, many years ago. But Esther's relationship with Rosalind made her impress upon her own children the importance of being close to their siblings and their spouses. Esther was also a wonderful friend to her many, many friends here at the temple and in her neighborhood. As I mentioned, my own mother was truly blessed to have Esther as that kind of friend, caring and supportive, always there for her. And Esther had many other good friends as well, like friends like Kate Carbo and Adele Flesher. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. And many others who were all, like her, very good, kind, caring, and down-to-earth people. How can I ever repay Esther's kindness and support to my own mother over the years? My mother didn't drive it. Esther gave her rides on so many occasions. And that's the kind of good friend that Esther Meth was to everybody she knew. So many of Esther's good friends were from right here at Temple Beth Shalom, where she and Marvin have been members since the late 60s. Esther was not only a member of the temple for all these years, but also an active member, especially active in sisterhood. She was even on the sisterhood board until only very recently. Esther most certainly had a Yiddish neshama, a Jewish soul. She kept a kosher home throughout her life. She lit candles for Shabbat every Friday night, even if nobody else was there. She attended services every Shabbat morning, at least until COVID, and then later watched TBS services on live stream. She also watched services live streamed from Central Synagogue on Friday nights. She had that Borscht Belt sense of humor. She had a real love of the Jewish tradition and embodied so many of its central values: love of family, kindness and compassion, deeds of chesed, of kindness and caring. Hachnasat orchim, hospitality, opening her home to people. And just a great love and a great pride in being Jewish. She also had such strong Jewish convictions. I loved it when her kids told me that when Esther went to shul with her friends, they always had a plan for the kiddush after services, especially if there was lox. They would say, "You get the table, I'll get the lox." The temple was her lifeline. Her friendships were here. She loved the Jewish tradition. She took such great pride in being Jewish throughout her whole life. Other than the synagogue, Esther played mahjong and bridge and canasta. She also volunteered, together with my mother and others, to set up and work the weekly bridge games at the temple with Roberta for many, many years. And that was, I can tell you from my mom, that helping Roberta with the bridge was like a holy thing. It was like a mitzvah. How many times did we not get her to babysit for us because she had to go help Roberta with the bridge? She and Marvin went out to Montauk each summer. They went to Florida in the winters, but decided not to buy a place down there since Esther realized that rather than buying a place to live with a 30-year mortgage, if she took the money and invested it in CDs, the returns would be more than enough to go to a hotel instead. Esther was quite knowledgeable and understanding of money matters. She always felt that a person's money should work for them. She learned as much as she could on her own and from others about investing and just had good street smarts as well. She liked to say, "I can run General Motors." Given hard work and dedication to learning as much as she could, she was, after all, as you know, very intelligent and capable, admired and respected by everyone who knew her. Esther also loved cooking. It was another one of her passions. Every Friday night, she made a roast chicken, brisket, or roast beef for Shabbat. She made great pot roast, I'm told, and delicious soups. She was quite the balabusta. And of course, she had to learn the hard way that it isn't a good idea to put aluminum foil in the microwave. She did that down in Florida once, and there was a lot of smoke in her apartment and all the way down the hall. One of the women living there told her, "Can you believe that some lunatic put tin foil in the microwave?" And she responded, "Oh, really?" Esther often lived in, I'm told, in denial, which was part of her MO. But as she herself always used to say, denial is not only a river in Egypt. Esther had a very close relationship with the butcher, Barry, from Nassau Kosher Meats in East Meadow, where she used to buy like a whole half of the cow at a time, which he prepared for her as brisket and steaks and burgers. She always liked to get a good deal. She also was very friendly with Maury at Ben's in Greenville, as long as they gave her the table she wanted, while Marvin just told her that he'd wait outside for her until she decided where she wanted to sit. Esther was also very civic-minded as well. She volunteered regularly as a candy striper, a patient advocate at St. Francis Hospital. She loved that and even got an award from St. Francis for her many years of service there. She was very proud of that SFH sticker that she had on her car from her volunteer work at the hospital. And part of her routine was then going to North Shore Farms on Port Washington Boulevard after she finished her volunteer work at St. Francis. Nina tells me that her mother aged like a queen. While it was hard at first for Esther to accept help as she got older, she ultimately agreed to have an aide, not as much for herself, but as not to be a burden on her children and grandchildren and having to care for her. She didn't want to be selfish in that way. She wanted to live her life knowing that her kids would be able to live their own lives. That said, Esther's health and energy has surely declined in the last couple of years, but nothing really stopped her, and her mind was totally there to the very end. As we were saying the other day, no matter how many years a person may live, it's always too soon for them to pass away. As someone said the other night, you know, you never have enough birthdays. But this is life, and we must accept it. And the person should never die any younger, as someone else said it when we spoke. That is the perspective of seeing life as a gift that God gives us. That said, we will certainly miss Esther greatly, as we surely do already so much today. And a final thought. In the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, there's a famous verse which says, Tov Shem Mishemen Tov, better a good name than the most precious oil. The rabbis asked, but why should a good name be compared to oil? Why don't we say, well, better a good name than the greatest amount of treasure? And we find the answer, say the rabbis, in a peculiar quality of oil. For oil, when poured upon any other liquid, remains on top. But if you take a little oil and pour it onto the ground, a short time goes by and there's no mark of the final resting place of that oil. But, said Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of kings, better a good name than the most precious oil, because a good name, even when the individual is interred in the ground, remains forever, enshrined in the hearts of the living. May it ever be so in the lives of the people who knew and loved Esther Meth so much. She certainly had a Shem Tov, a good name. May our many warm memories of Esther Meth, Esther Bat Michal, Verezel, always be a blessing in our lives. Tehei nishmata tzurura pitzror hachayim. May her soul ever be bound up in the bond of life. And let us say, Amen. And Esther was blessed to have an almost rabbi in her family. Her grandson, Mark, soon to be Rabbi Mark Hirsch of JTS year ordination of this May 16th. So we'd like to invite Rabbi Mark, to speak about his grandmother here today.
Thank you, Rabbi Jackness, and thank you to the friends and family who are here with us today. On Friday nights, Esther would stand in her kitchen. She would take out her 2 Shabbat candles, place them on the counter. She would light, very proudly, the Shabbat candles. She would put on a white doily, probably retrieved from the shelf outside there. She would cover her eyes. She would recite the traditional blessing over candles and Shabbat, and then would utter a private blessing for her family and her friends. Fast forward to Saturday nights, and Esther could often be found in her kitchen as well, taking part in Havdalah, the ritual conclusion of Shabbat she deeply loved. She even said once that Havdalah was one of her favorite services. There would be a candle burning in her kitchen, often brought to her from Israel. We would pass around cinnamon or other spices, pass around wine, recite the traditional blessings, and sing the traditional songs. In those moments, we also sang the line, La Yehudim Haita Ora Vesimcha Vesason Veyikar, that the Jews enjoyed light and gladness, happiness and honor. We, as Esther's family and her friends here today, for her 91 years of life, also enjoyed the light, the gladness, the happiness, and the honor from her. How fitting it is, though, that this line that we recite on Havdalah also comes from the story of the book of Esther. We read the book of Esther or the scroll of Esther on the holiday of Purim. And Esther, or Queen Esther, as our Jewish tradition teaches us, was a proud Jewish woman. Indeed, the same qualities of this verse, Queen Esther also took part in. Queen Esther enjoyed light and gladness, happiness and honor from her friends and her family. So my grandma Esther's two favorite holidays, or perhaps two of her most favorite holidays or observances, were Havdalah and Purim. It was Havdalah because, as she said, there were so many sensual experiences, from sight to smell to spirituality. But for Purim, that was her favorite holiday because, as she used to say, I got to be queen for the day. Jewish tradition teaches us, Kishmo Kain Hu, a person is like their namesake. Queen Esther was somebody who was proud of her Jewish heritage, who was deeply committed to her family. She stood up for what she believed in. But these are not just qualities of an ancient Queen Esther. No, these are qualities of our Esther Meth here today, the qualities of her 91 years of life. Queen Esther had a tremendous power with words. In fact, the simple words that she said, according to the story, saved an entire Jewish people. How fitting, then, that when Esther spoke, she not only spoke with wisdom, she spoke with tremendous humor. The words that Esther would say, though, she would call her, quote, Esther-isms. And I see our family chuckling here in the front few rows. An Esther-ism was a quotable line. It was a piece of wisdom, a lesson she wanted to impart on her family. And of course, it made us laugh, and it was filled with a joke, especially from the Borscht Belt. So I would like to share 5 Esther-isms from her life. These 5 Esther-isms take place all throughout her rich 91 years of life. And I hope that by doing so, we see not just how the qualities of the ancient Queen Esther are present, but how those are also qualities of our Esther Meth today. Esther-ism number 1 takes place in none other than her kitchen at 9 Oakwood Circle, where we will inevitably gather later today for Shiva. Esther's pride and glory were her family. And when you walked into her kitchen, there was either a roast coming out of the oven or a bowl of tuna salad being served on the table. She kept a kosher home and made almost daily trips to the bakery because she loved the fresh-baked breads and cakes that she inherited from her father-in-law, Nassin, Zichrono Livracha, also a baker. As Esther's daughter, Rani, commented, quote, we had a house full of Hamantaschen, because again, her favorite holiday was Purim. I can picture Esther standing at the countertop, chopping vegetables for her flanken soup, or setting out her meat dishes for dinner. But at the same time, there was something else beside Esther in her kitchen, and that was the telephone. Now, when I say the telephone, I think a lot of us here will remember that for most of Esther's life, it was not just a regular telephone. It was an old rotary phone on the wall, and it had a long cable. And Esther could be found with the phone on her ear or holding it on her shoulder, walking to the pantry, walking to the table, or standing at the sink, hacking away on the phone to her friends or her family. And of course, every Sunday, expecting a call from Murray, who wanted to come speak to his Schwester Esther. The relationships that Esther had with her family, she showed through the meichels she created. A meichel is a Yiddish word for a concoction, a dish that she inherited from her family. These delicious dishes that she would make for us that I've named. And so this brings us to Esther-ism number 1. And that is, quote, she would say, I'll cook you the finest in kosher cuisine, a nice geschmacka meichel. And boy, those meichels were pretty geschmack that she would make. Esther-ism number 2 takes place right here, in fact, at Temple Beth Shalom. It is deeply meaningful for our family today to be here. This is an institution that Esther and Marvin, Zichronam Livracha, first arrived to 56 years ago. It was a center, a social scene for them. They would attend dances, Shabbat services, smachot, joyous occasions. They made many friends here, year after year, all throughout these decades. But in the last 18 years, Temple Beth Shalom became a lifeline for my grandmother. It was here that she developed a core group of women with whom she became friends. These are women with whom she learned how to live life as a widow. She socialized. She would always find herself kibitzing at Shabbat Kiddush with a deck of cards in her purse to strike up a quick bridge game right after Shabbat services. Esther served as the executive vice president for membership of the sisterhood, a role that she spoke about with pride and devotion. And I think there was something connected between her role in the kitchen and her role in charge of membership with the sisterhood. She was outgoing, warm, family-friendly, family-oriented, wanted to build community, generous, all qualities that she showed when she welcomed in people to her kitchen, and the same qualities that she showed at this synagogue in her sisterhood and beyond. That is why it is deeply meaningful for our family, Rabbi Jackness, that you are here with us today. Your parents, Estelle and Nat, Zichronam Livracha, were dear friends of my grandparents. Toda Rabbah. Thank you so much for being in our family for these decades. Esther also understood that she came from a time when women did not have the same roles in Jewish life that they do today. But I think she was proud to reclaim something in Jewish tradition that was not open to her for so long. It is for that reason that a highlight of Esther's was the Sisterhood Shabbat. And perhaps some women here also were involved in those Sisterhood Shabbats. These were annual occasions when women from sisterhoods across Long Island conservative temples would gather here once a year to lead the service. And Esther was very proud that all parts of the service, from the prayers to the Torah reading to the coordination of the service, all of that was coordinated by women. But Esther, as I said, was really navigating her role as a modern woman in a conservative synagogue, also trying to understand her traditional post-war background at the same time. I think it is for that reason she preferred, even though she knew Hebrew and Yiddish, she preferred not to have a speaking role in the service. So instead, for these sisterhood Shabbats, she liked to walk up the bima, up to the ark behind me, and she would open the ark. Or when given the honor, she would walk up and dress the Torah scroll after it was read. There was one Shabbat in particular that I was sitting with her in services right there in the back row. And she said to me, looking at this very bima, she said to me, "I see my whole life pass by me on this bima. I made 4 bar and bat mitzvahs here, with my mom and her siblings, 2 baby namings, a wedding, and then a funeral of my grandfather here in 2008. She never said it, but I think she would have found it deeply meaningful that today, as we escort her to her eternal home, we are also in this very synagogue that for 56 years she saw so many events of her life take place, let alone in this very room. In her later years, when coming to shul was not an option every Shabbat, she took part in the service via Zoom at home. And that means that for the last 6 years of the COVID pandemic, she attended all of the bar and bat mitzvahs that took place on this very bima from the comfort of her own living room. And she used to joke with us that the best part of attending services on Zoom, she doesn't have to give a gift. But what do we do when everybody would walk down the hallway to the auditorium to go have Kiddush? She would say, all I have to do is go to my refrigerator, open it up, and there I have my Shabbat Kiddush. That is why we are so grateful for the clergy of this congregation, Rabbi Joseph Sternstein, Zichronam Livracha, Rabbi Alan Lucas, Rabbi Joshua Ben Gideon, Rabbi Kara Weinstein Rosenthal, Rabbi David Bachman, and Cantor Ofer Barnori as well. Toda Rabbah Lachem. From Esther's Shabbat candles to her Havdalah ritual, to her involvement here in Temple Beth Shalom, she did not just know Yiddishkeit, she lived by Yiddishkeit. It is for that reason that we arrive at our second Esterism of the day. She would say, "Come to Sisterhood Shabbat. You'll see how these women know how to daven." And boy, did these women here know how to daven. Esther was a deeply proud Jewish woman, proud to be able to be part of the women who knew how to daven. Esterism number 3. This takes place here in Roslyn, but also in the surrounding towns. Esther grew up with a deep empathy for the loss of 2 siblings. From an early age, she was committed to donating to organizations that helped sick children in memory of her sister. That is why our family today has asked for donations to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and the Ronald McDonald House as well. She understood what it was like to grow up in a family with the grief of having lost a child young and wanted to pay that forward. Years later, after she lost her brother and her brother Harold and his family, Zichronam Livracha, she wanted to channel that trauma to do good in the world, to give back in some ways. And while she carried the trauma, she also wanted, as I said, to pay the lessons she learned forward. For over a decade, Esther served as a volunteer at St. Francis Hospital. And very quickly, the staff there understood that she had a remarkable ability, the same ability that she had in her kitchen to welcome people, the same ability she had here to be involved in the sisterhood leadership. And she was quickly asked to become a patient advocate. Her role at the hospital was to go room by room, visiting patients and their families, consoling them, comforting them. She drew on her wells of empathy and experience in crisis and trauma as well to give a friendly face to somebody who perhaps was feeling fearful or alone. In her later years, when she was no longer able to attend her volunteering opportunities in person, she took part in a program called Knit-Tzva. Through the local JCC, Knit-Tzva was when she was able to knit blankets and sweaters to donate to local patients of hospitals as a mitzvah, a commandment to give back. Queen Esther, in the story of Purim, was a woman of tremendous chesed, acts of loving kindness to help others. But as her daughter Ronnie commented, though, quote, she shared her love, her laughter, and her wisdom, not just with the Jewish community, but with the greater community overall. So this brings us to Esterism number 3. And she would say, quote, I make $1 million a day volunteering. That's how I feel. Esterism number 4 takes place of all days today, the day that we lay her to rest for the final time. Esther lived by the value of hakarat hatov in Jewish tradition, giving thanks for the good that we have in the world. She felt tremendous gratitude for the doctors, nurses, and aides who took care of her. But really, though, doctors may have felt that she was in a different kind of way taking care of them. Esther would walk in to the appointments and immediately make the office staff laugh. She would amaze the doctors at her resilience at age 91 even. She had wit and humor and a desire to kibitz, to chat with them as well. They were there to care for her, but in some way, she was also caring for these doctors and nurses themselves. Doctors loved her, her daughter Ronnie said. Esther aged like a queen. Again, Queen Esther. It is for that reason that our family is so grateful to the tender, loving care of Cece and Celia for the 4 years that they gave to her. Celia is here with us today. Celia, our family is so grateful for the dedication and the care you gave to Esther. You gave her love. Thank you. The legacy of Grandma Esther includes 4 children, 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, siblings, cousins, friends, nephews, in-laws, a sisterhood of this congregation, bridge games, phone calls, Shabbat tables, and of course, many, many Esther-isms. Our family feels so fortunate to have had her in our life for so long, in mostly overall good health for this time. And so this brings us to Esther-ism number 4. She would say, even recently, look, at my funeral, no one is going to say that I died young. And sure enough, at age 91, she has not died young. La Yehudim Haita Ora Vesimcha Vesason. We, her family, have enjoyed light and gladness, honor and happiness from our Queen Esther for 91 years. Today we accompany her to her final resting place, her eternal home. Of course, though, she would joke that her final resting place was an apartment out there in Farmingdale, waiting for her with Marvin. But today, after 53 years of marriage and then 18 years apart, Esther and Marvin reunite. I pray that we carry with us the legacy of this woman, devotion to family, a commitment to others, a deep pride in our Jewish heritage. We carry the strength to share this wisdom, this humor, this wit with others. Today we send off the Queen, but we are left with the memories and the legacy that she left us. Grandma Esther, for 30 years you have taught me Yiddishkeit, Menschlichkeit, and Torah. It is a kavod, as you would say, an honor to get to pass that on. I do so as a rabbi, but first and foremost, I do that as your grandson. Thank you. And so how fitting it is that I leave you today with one final Esther-ism, number 5. And this Esther-ism was about both today, the day that we lay her to rest, but also about the days that are ahead. She would say, go home, eat bagels and lox, enough lox, make sure there's plenty of chocolate babka, don't be skimpy on that, and then go on and live your life. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu, may it be your will, O God, that we have the strength to do just that. Tehi nishmata tzrura b'tzror hachayim, may the soul of Esther Meth, Esther bat Mechel verezel, be bound up in the bonds of life. And may we say, Amen.
It's customary now to rise for the memorial prayer. And actually, Rabbi Hirsch. Come back. And by the way, you can keep this my information thing. Here.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim. Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Chashchina. B'ma'alot, Kiddushim Tohorim, Kezohar, Harakia Mashirim. Et Nishmat, Esther, Bat Mechel Verezel, Shechalchala Olamaha, Began Eden Tehem Menuchataha, Ana Bal Harachamim, Hastireha Beseter Kenafechala Olamim, Utzror Bitzror Hachayim, Et Nishmataha, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach B'shalom, Al Mishkava Venomar. Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Esther Meth, Esther Bat Mechel Verezel, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that your loved one, that our loved one, finds perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bonds of life, and may she rest in peace. And may we say, Amen.
The burial will take place immediately following this service at New Montefiore Cemetery in the Temple Beth Shalom section after this service. And then following the burial, there'll be a Seudat Havra'ah and the beginning of Shiva. Today, following the burial through 9 p.m. at Esther and Marvin's home, 9 Oakwood Circle in Roslyn, that's in Flower Hill, with a minyan this evening at 8 p.m. 8 p.m. And then, continuing Shiva, Nina will be sitting Shiva Saturday night and Sunday at her home, 11 Wedgwood Drive, Dix Hills. Saturday night, 6:30 to 9 p.m. with a minyan at 7:30 p.m. Sunday, 2 to 5:30 p.m. with a minyan at 5 p.m. Toby and Ronnie will be sitting Shiva together Saturday night and Sunday at Ronnie's home, 32 Benedict Road, Scarsdale, Saturday night from 6 to 9 p.m., Sunday from 1 to 5 p.m. And Harris will be sitting Shiva Saturday night and Sunday at his home, 35 Lancer Road, Riverside, Connecticut. Again, Saturday night, 6 to 9 p.m. with a minyan at 7 p.m. and Sunday from 1 to 6 p.m. with a minyan at 5 p.m. And donations in Esther's memory may be sent to the Ronald McDonald House of Long Island, www.rmh-newyork.org, or to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, www.stjude.org. And you can